We begin in Germany. Dynamo Dresden, Bundesliga 2, has 3 confirmed cases of COVID-19. That with the league scheduled to return to action on May 16th. Meanwhile, in France, Lyon's president publicized August 7th as the date for his club's Champions League second leg match against Juventus. The club has since said no date has been finalized. And in Italy, La Repubblica is reporting at least 6 Serie A clubs have not paid their players a wage since January. For more on this, we welcome in the stars of the Gab and Jules podcast, Gab Marcotti and Julien. Gab, I'll start with you. The news out of Dresden, how do you think it could impact the Bundesliga's plans to start next weekend?
So I think this is going to be the crux of the issue for everybody that restarts, and it's good to be clear here. The issue, the key issue that every league is dealing with that wants to restart is, what do you do with a player who tests positive? Do you simply isolate the player, or do you isolate the entire team that he's been working with? What's happened in Germany is this. The German government, they were happy with a protocol that said, look, if somebody tests positive, we're simply going to go and isolate the individual. That's what happened at Cologne and in other clubs where people have tested positive. However, Germany is a federal state. There are 16 states within Germany. And within those states, on matters of health, it's the local health ministry that effectively has controls. And in Dresden, the local health minister there said, well, I don't really care what the national government guidelines are. We're going to exercise caution here, and we're going to order the entire team to quarantine. So obviously, they're going to miss 2 weeks. Maybe they can make it up. Maybe they won't. Certainly, their game against Hanover, looks to be postponed. This could be a problem further on. It depends what the health ministers in a majority of German regions end up decreeing. My understanding is the majority of them will not be quite as hardline, and the majority of them will back the government and the Bundesliga's proposal to simply go and isolate the individual players.
Jules, what can you tell us about what's going on in France? Busy week for the Lyon president, not just the premature announcement, but he's also threatening legal action against Ligue 1.
Yes, that's right, which we knew since the decision was taken to stop the season, with Lyon being 7th and missing out on Europe. And Jean-Michel Aulas has been very vocal in his lobbying in private as well, very active to try to get that decision overturned. And he's still hoping that somehow between now and May the 25th, when really you need to make a final decision on what you do and inform UEFA and FIFA, he's really hoping that the decision could be overturned. He's hoping that he can convince people in France that they made that decision too quickly, too much in a rush, that maybe they could have waited another week or two to see what others were doing in Europe, and also what the situation with the pandemic was doing in France, and then maybe take the decision, and maybe that decision would have been different then. Maybe we could have played a few more matches somewhere in August or maybe towards the end of July. So he's still hoping that he can do that. So far, he doesn't have many support with him. There's Amiens and Toulouse, the 2 teams who were relegated, who are also pushing for that. But 3 clubs is not really that many to get that kind of decision overturned. However, he still has a bit of time and a lot of faith that he can do that, whether that goes through legal battle or not.
Jules, what do you think about the case that he's trying to make? Do you think there is some regret in France, if not about the decision that was taken, about the timing of it?
I think it's growing a little bit, and when you see other countries, although as we've been saying many times on the show, the pandemic was fought in a very different way in every country, hit countries in a different way. Of course, Germany, for example, have 7,000 deaths. It's far more in the UK with almost 32,000. It's more in France with almost 25,000. So you can't compare really, but however, you can still look at what other people are doing. And I think maybe that decision was taken a bit early when you think that horse racing, for example, is allowed to start again tomorrow in France, but not football. Behind closed door, horse racing as well. And you think like, well, if horse racing can go behind closed doors, surely there might have been a way a month down the line to have football starting again. So there's those voices more and more coming out and saying maybe we rushed that one a bit more. And I don't know if it would be enough to overturn it and maybe change it, but certainly you could feel the frustration growing a bit.
Meanwhile, Gab, what's going on in Italy? They're trying to get back to football, but some clubs aren't paying their players.
Yeah, this is a report in an Italian paper saying that six clubs haven't paid their players since January. The initial reaction has been that actually that's more of a technical thing in the sense that they've received their January wages. They did not receive their March wages or their February wages, and that was because the league was halted by then, and they will be getting them later. I don't think that this is necessarily at the top of everybody's minds right now. Top of everybody's minds is figuring out how to, or if it's going to be possible to get back. This coming week should be a key week. And again, the single biggest issue right now, not the only issue, but the single biggest issue is whether to adopt going back to what we said about the Bundesliga, the protocol where if somebody tests positive, they simply go into quarantine, or whether you have to quarantine the entire team. Quarantining the entire team would make it very, very difficult for the league to restart. But it's more meetings this week. There's also the fact that the broadcasters haven't paid their sixth and final installment as well. So that opens up another front, another battle to deal with. That's about 230 million euros, around $250 million. That's up in the air there. So there's a ton on everybody's plate right now.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.